Brother John? Oh, there we are. Whew. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you tonight. Glad you survived the weather that was what it was yesterday. It didn't end up really doing anything here, at least not by the building by our house. It rained some and some wind and little thunder, I guess, but didn't really make much noise. So thankful for hopefully everyone's safety during all of that. And then, of course, today you get cold weather and more rain. It's just Tennessee weather. But glad that you are here tonight. I want to begin by asking you for your prayers as Lauren is gone until Friday morning. So pray that the children survive, and pray that I also survive. But they're okay. Liam has had a little bit of a fever, so he's home tonight, not by himself. But Sarah Grace is helping me out with that, and she's sitting with him tonight, and Ella should be in class. So, so we're having a little bit of a change of scenery, a little change up for the next few days. But Lauren had a work trip, so she'll be back Friday morning. Please remember our evangelism seminar starting Sunday. Remember that we will not meet Sunday evening, that we will do a 9:30, 10:30, and 1:30 deal with lunch in between the 10:30 and 1:30 lessons. And then Monday is 6:30 and 7:30, and Tuesday is 6:30 with a guys and a women's session, two different sessions. I promise that it will be a blessing to you, that hopefully that you will be encouraged, but even more so be motivated. And that's the goal of the seminar. So if you were thinking about, I don't know, I would make it a point to be here. It's going to be worth every second that you spend to be here. And we don't have many meetings or seminars anymore, so it's not like we're asking you to give up a ton of time. I hope and I pray that you'll make the decision to be here and be blessed by Rob and what he will be sharing with all of us. Now, we are moving through these Psalms of Lament, and we're going to continue to do so tonight. We're almost through this series of lessons, and really what we'll see tonight and what we've kind of seen the last couple of weeks is some of these questions that are asked of God sound harsh, or did he really say this to God? But the reality of it is we'll see tonight, having a strong enough relationship with God where you're comfortable being honest with God about how you feel in your current situation and what you're going through. Knowing that God hears you and He's listening and He answers prayers, and you trust in that. Now, the idea tonight behind this lesson, we've kind of had a phrase behind some of these lessons, and tonight's is this phrase, or the concept, the idea, will you hide yourself forever? Will you hide yourself forever? And we usually begin with some quotes or some lyrics to some songs or psalms that we sing. And I have two quotes tonight to share with you. The first is from Walter Brueggemann in his book, Praying the Psalms. It says, "The collection of the Psalter is not for those whose life is one of uninterrupted continuity and equilibrium. Such people should stay safely in the book of Proverbs, which reflects on the continuities of life. But few of us live that kind of life. Most of us think our lives are that way. Most of us who think our lives are that way have been numbered, desensitized, and suppressed so that we are cut off from what is in fact going on in our lives." And then Patrick D. Miller, in his book, Heaven's Prisoners, The Lament as Christian Prayer, says this: "Recovering the language of lament means finding the possibility of this combination, protest and trust." Protest and trust. The prayers of lament are prayers of persuasion, full of reasons to try to persuade God to help. So they do not assume God's deliverance. They are also prayers of trust, so they do assume God's deliverance. So it's kind of, they're both. In one instance, you're trying to persuade God to deliver or to act. In another, your ultimate trust in Him trusts that He will. And it's kind of a combination of these. Now, as we've seen over the last several lessons in this series, the psalmists teach us how to approach God with our concerns about life and other people, releasing to God our emotions, our pain, even our desire, as we've seen a little bit last few weeks, for vengeance that comes about in some of these psalms of lament. When life takes sudden and even prolonged turns into darkness, these poets, these psalmists, lead us in calling out to God, knowing that God, the God to whom we call, is Himself the answer to the needs that we're seeking. Now, I'm going to give you some psalms to consider. First, let's look at Psalm 61. We're going to look at two real quick, and I've got a few more that I'll quote to you, reference to you, that are here in my notes. But Psalm 61, notice what is said here, and then we'll look at Psalm 62 as well. Psalm 61, 1 through 3, verses 1 through 3. Let me flip over there to be with you here. Psalm 61, verse 1. The psalmist says, "Hear my cry, O God, attend to my prayer. From the end of the earth I will cry to you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a shelter for me, a strong tower from the enemy." And so we see this language here goes back to that these, when we find ourselves in these prolonged turns into darkness and struggle, the psalmists, when they find themselves in that situation, say things like this, crying out, calling out to God, knowing that God is Himself the answer to the needs we have. And with this language, these psalmists also provide an example of life lived with God when that valley is deep and lonely. If you go over to Psalm 62, and we're going to read verses 5 through 7 of Psalm 62, notice what the psalmist says here. "My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from Him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength, and my refuge is in God." Confidence in spite of attack, trust when the foundations shake, a quiet, non-anxious spirit, not because we shut our eyes to the circumstances or retreat from the reality, but because of the relationship we have with God. When our relationship with God is what it should be, then we do have confidence no matter the attacks around us. Then we are able to trust with this foundation that is firm and doesn't shake, and we are able to have this quiet, this calm, non-anxious spirit. But that depends on a relationship with God that is strong enough for that. The Psalms teach us that in all these times, what matters most is God's presence. If God is with us, we can rest under His protection. In fact, in the New Testament, you see a similar phrase, if God is for us, right, then who can be against us? What can man do to me if God is for me? But some psalms that kind of go with this, in Psalm 27:5 it says, "He will hide me in His shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of His tent. He will set me on, high on a rock." Psalm 23 in verse 4 says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," what? "I will fear no evil." Why? "For you are with me." God's presence brings that calmness. Remember we talked in the parent pact lesson a few weeks back that part of that pact is being present, and that the presence of a parent can bring calmness and peace to the life of the child. And the same is true when we remember and acknowledge the presence of the Father above and the life of His children here below. And so we see that in the psalm. In Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. That's verses 1 through 3 of Psalm 46. With God near in relationship, I can call out with confidence, knowing that God hears and will respond. And in relationship, God invites me to speak my heart honestly and without fear. More than the words and patterns of lament, beyond any how-to guide for prayer, the psalmists lead us to an intimate relationship with God and what that looks like. Now, when you think about relationship and relationships, and we think about our relationship when it comes to how we view God. As we think about relationships we have with people that lead us to approach how we think of God, over time we come to understand that there really are a few friendships in life that are capable of genuine transparency. Genuine transparency. Only here, with love intact, may we speak about what is needed and at the same time be willing to receive whatever the other person needs to say to us. Genuine transparency. Such friendships are rare. Most relationships operate at a far lower level than that, and appropriately so. We listen with internal gauges that are set to filter what we hear and answer carefully, not wanting to offend, sometimes dancing around what we really think to guard their feelings. In casual relationships, we rarely confront or criticize, and we do not take criticism well. Is it any wonder why people get so defensive when someone that's a part of the same congregation as them, but has spent no time really getting to know them, tries to offer some type of spiritual correction from out of the blue? Not that that person doesn't need it, but it's coming from a place where someone's not invested in them. The relationship is not to the point where criticism is offered appropriately or handled appropriately. So how do you change that? There's two options. One, and this is not the right option, just keep your mouth closed and don't talk to people you've not really invested in. I would not recommend that. The option that Christians must choose is fix it. And you fix it by getting to know people. There are people here you already are close to. You might have them over all the time for food, or they have you over for food. Maybe you play cards. Maybe you play other board games. Maybe you have each other over to watch the big games. Maybe you just, go out places together or go on trips together. Guess what? All of that is awesome, and none of that is sinful or wrong. There's natural connections we have with people. However, the danger and what happens in the church is, you see it in youth groups all the time, is when this group only recognizes and acknowledges each other at the expense of those around. Now you've got people that are ignored and rejected and on the outskirts, but you wouldn't know it because you're only concerned about the few that you're always with. So how do you fix that? We're going off a little topic here, but this helps us to understand how we view relationship. How do you fix that? Do you stop spending time with the people that you get along with naturally and have close bonds with? No, I don't think that's right. So how do you fix it? Yeah? You do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, you got to spend time. So let's think about it. How do we fix the lack of connection we have with some without sacrificing the connection we have with others? How do you strengthen, or how do you start the relationship that you don't have yet and strengthen that without being at the expense of the strong friendships you have? How do you do that? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, we do what's easy, which connects back to what Steve just said. We have to step out and put forth that effort. When I was a youth minister, and I can't remember if I said this in here, I think I said it to the young professionals class on a Sunday morning class that we had, but if I said it in here, I apologize. But when I was a youth minister, I had kids that I naturally connected with that played sports and or had similar interests that might not even be sports. We had similar interests, so there was a natural connection with those kids as a youth minister. So for me, I naturally connected with them. It didn't take a lot of effort. It just happened. You know how that happens. So then there are other kids that are doing things that I never did and I don't have experience with, and that might not be necessarily my particular hobby of choice or interest of choice, and it takes more effort to make sure that I don't, because the people you connect with naturally, it's a magnet. It's comfortable. So when you see them, without realizing it, it pulls you into where they are. And that's the same with youth group kids and a youth minister, is you are naturally pulled to the kids you connect with, but you've got to fight the pull, not to ignore them, but to make sure you don't exclude and ignore the ones that takes more effort. And so one thing if you already do something with everybody, with certain people outside of here all the time, I'm not saying don't acknowledge them here, but maybe don't talk to them the entire time you're here. You know what I mean? Like, maybe don't stay in the same corner talking to the same people every time without ever walking somewhere else to talk to other people. Maybe the people that are naturally pulling you to them because of those relationships you already have, be thankful for those, say hey to them, but maybe Sundays and Wednesdays are a great opportunity for you to be able to talk to those people that you don't have that relationship with, and set up opportunities for meals or a game night, or, just be like, hey, I know your name, but, we've never really done anything together. Let's get together and have a meal and get to know each other a little better. It's going to take proactiveness, and somebody's got to be proactive. And if everyone chooses to be the person that waits to be approached, then no one ever gets approached. You're all constantly waiting, and then we all leave going home talking to the same handful of people we talk to every week. And, and honestly, how many meaningful conversations do you have on a Sunday or a Wednesday versus how many drive-by conversations do you have? You know what a drive-by conversation is? Hey, I'm good, how are you? I'm great, how are you? Great to see you. And then you just keep walking. And it's not meant to be rude or in a way that's ignoring others, but it's just you're trying to get from point A to point. Maybe you're leaving class. If you go to class that's not in the auditorium, you're trying to get to the auditorium. Maybe, you're trying to go pick up your kids that are in a class and then get back before worship starts. Maybe you've got to run to the restroom and you want to try to do that before worship starts. There's all these things that you're not trying to ignore each other, but you can't have a real meaningful conversation in those moments. But those are great opportunities to set up times to get together and be intentional about it. Our relationships that we have with people here are going to affect the way we view our relationship with God. And when I do premarital counseling, I always try and get the guy and the girl to realize that how they grew up is going to flow into all of that relationship as husband and wife. So when it comes to conflict resolution, how they saw conflict resolution in their own home is going to affect how they approach conflict resolution in the marital relationship. Communication, how they saw communication's presence or absence in the home growing up is going to affect how they themselves communicate. A guy is going to remember how his dad treated his mom, and that is going to play into potentially how he treats his own spouse, because he's going to have a view of how a husband should be. And where's he going to get that? From the guy he sees the most being a husband and being a man. And the same goes for the woman and the mom, learning how to be a godly wife and what that means. And so those are going to dictate relationships outside of the home we grew up in, and we have to realize that because we grow up in different backgrounds, we're going to approach it differently. All of that is neat to celebrate, meaning we should celebrate the differences we have and not view them as something that creates division where we could never have a relationship. We don't have to be in full agreement with somebody to have a close relationship. So I challenge you, I know we need to move further into this lesson, but as I think of relationships, and we need to realize, I've got a lot of thoughts. I'm trying to figure out which one to put out there. We need to be able to hold each other accountable in the church. That's part of what it means to be a part of God's family. Hey, you really shouldn't have done that. Hey, I heard you're thinking about this. That's probably not the best decision. But we can't do that the right way if we just have a bunch of people that don't really know each other. We just worship at the same place. That's not a real family. That's just a group of people. That's a crowd. And it's no different than going to a crowd at a concert because we all like the same band. And I'm not trying to in any way demean God, but what I'm saying is we just happen to come to the same place because we want to worship God. But that doesn't necessarily mean we came because we want to worship with each other. So we've got to cultivate those relationships, and when we do, it gives us a chance to learn how to give criticism and how to receive criticism in the way God intends for it to function and be. But too many people want to offer it and not receive it, and they don't care to offer it to anybody at all, especially those they don't even really know that well. And that's not how it actually works. Now, when we think about God and our relationship with God, when our relationship is what it should be with God, we have opportunity for honest conversation. You see, the stronger the relationship, the more opportunity for honest conversation. That's why a lot of people talk about, at the heart of evangelism, you got to have investment in relationship. It's not just an overnight deal. It takes time. And you build that relationship to earn the trust and the respect of the one that you want to talk to about Jesus. And when we think about this honesty with God, I go back to Habakkuk. I just keep going back to him because he's a prophet of God, but he has honest things to say to God. If you remember the series we did that I did on Sunday mornings, maybe 2022 now. That's crazy. Can you believe it's 2024? But the series called When God Doesn't, and looking at the prophet Habakkuk as he asked God these questions. God, do you hear? God, do you care? God, are you going to do something about this? Not because he didn't trust God, but what he knew about God didn't line up with what he was seeing in front of him. Does that happen to you? What you know about God and what you see with these evil people in the world is not lining up in front of you? Like, why are these people seeming to prosper? Right? And so we have to ask ourselves, is my relationship so superficial with God that I'm too scared to really tell him what's on my heart? Do I just have the same repetitive nature to what I say to God when I pray? Or do I really open up about what I'm feeling right now as I talk to God? There's a difference there. Learning how to pray appropriately, that happens as our faith strengthens. The more our faith weakens, the more we don't know how to talk to God. It's not about the words we say or don't say all the time. It's not about using certain phrases or not using certain phrases. It's about an honest conversation with the Father, knowing that he hears and he receives that honesty, even if that honesty involves us wondering why. Wondering, when are you going to intervene? And so we're going to look at some questions tonight that we see in the Psalms, questions for God that these psalmists ask. And they ask because of the strong relationship they have with God. So they're asking these difficult questions of God and about God, wanting to persuade him to do something, wondering if he's going to do something. And these questions come from a relationship strong enough to be willing to ask them. For these psalmists, either God is an intimate friend to whom we speak our true thoughts and feelings, or God is in fact no friend at all. But the intimate friend is what leads to the honest conversation. Now, many of these questions that we're going to look at are loaded questions, they're loaded questions that are masking really innuendo with this initial appearance of innocence. And we'll kind of see what that is as we go. But the first one is the question, why? We're going to look at 7, okay? The first one is the question, why are you standing so far away? Why are you standing so far away? The psalmists, the poets often express confidence that God is present and aware of their needs. But there is this bewilderment that God is doing nothing. I know you're there, but I'm confused why you're not doing something right now. And that was with Habakkuk. That was part of what he was saying. Psalm 10 verse 1 says, why do you stand so far off? In a familiar psalm, Psalm 22 verse 1, why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? These and other questions are using what we call anthropomorphic language. What is anthropomorphic? That's a big word. What does that mean? It's to take God and to put him in human terms. For example, God is standing. Okay, so why are you standing so far from me? Why are you far from helping me? So that this language is putting God in human terms. And we find that in several questions that are asked of God. We have no other way to understand or talk about God except with human language. So these psalms describe God as a shepherd, as a warrior, as a king, as a judge. Now, those are all descriptions of what? People, right? Of humans. Shepherds, warriors, kings, judges, those are human terms. And so we put God in these descriptions. And these are all limited but positive human images for the divine, for deity. In their questions, however, the psalmists depict God as, in a way, they shift. They're still looking at humans, but they're looking at a human that isn't following through on his or her word or doing what he or she said that they would do. And that's why these are harder to grasp. How dare they ask that question? And that's kind of how people respond. Why would you ask that? You see, the question, why do you stand far off, wonders whether God has become so nearsighted he can't see what's happening. Why are you so far from helping me? Psalm 22:1 suggests that God has wandered off in disregard of the poet, or perhaps has lost his ability to help. So both are wondering, God, are you going to do something? You're not here. Where are you? You're supposed to be here. Have you stopped caring? Are you looking at something else and not paying attention to me? Have you wandered away from me and so you can't hear my groanings? That's the idea behind what the psalmists are pouring out here. In Psalm 74, verse 11, it says, why do you hold back your hand? Why do you keep your hand in your bosom? God's hand is a symbol of what? Power. His power. When he summoned Moses to go to Egypt, what did he tell him to do? Or what did he say? He says, I will stretch out my hand and I will strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will perform in it. After that, he will let you go. That's Exodus 3, verse 20. But as far as the psalmist can see, God, it's almost like he refuses to take his hand out of his pocket. That's how the psalmist feels. It's not that he truly thinks God's not going to do anything, but right now he feels as if God is standing there with his hands in his pocket and not using the hand of power to deliver. Not that you doubted God, but have you ever had a moment in your life where you wondered why God didn't intervene the way you thought he would? You're not alone. You're not alone. Does that mean your faith is weak? Well, let's see. God said no to Jesus. He said no to David. Those are two pretty big names in the Scriptures. God said no frequently. God was silent at times. And people didn't understand. Even the most faithful didn't fully understand. But that doesn't mean they were weak. And so wondering why what you know about God is not lining up with what you're seeing in front of you right now, that doesn't mean your faith is weak. It means you're hurting and you're human. And you are comfortable enough and close enough with God to express that to him. The pain you really feel. And I think that is a blessing for us to be able to express that to God, our Father. There is a story in the book that I've kind of used in this class as kind of like a skeleton deal of what we were going to talk about. I wanted to share this story that was in the book because I thought it was funny. Now, it's coming up on the second question. So the first one, why are you standing so far away? The second one, how long will you let this go on? Now I'm going to tell you the story to go with that question in just a second. How long will you let this go on? The guy that wrote this book said at one place that he preached, every Sunday there was this same elderly couple that sat in the third pew from the front. I don't know where he preached, but he probably could work on that. Well, anyways, he said that they were gracious in encouragement to him as a preacher. The husband, however, had one particular habit that mortified his wife. Now, any wives out there, do your husbands have a habit that just makes you go, please stop? Lauren would probably say, yeah, and she probably lists 3 or 4, I don't know. But this one in particular, I thought this was so funny. Don't get any ideas from this. But when this man thought the sermon or Bible class might be running long, he would stand up. Now, they're in like 3 rows from the front. He would stand up, he would turn around, and he'd squint at the clock. And it was on the back of the wall of the auditorium. And he said he would just stand there looking, and his wife would be tugging his shirt, his coat or whatever, to pull him back down. Sometimes he would sit down. He said other times he'd turn back around for a second, look at the clock. And I just thought that was funny, but it was his way of asking, how long? And in asking that question, what is inferred in the question? It's already been too long. Right? If you're asking God, if the psalmist is crying out to God, how long will you let this go on? What are they saying? It's been going on for too long. At what point is it going to change? And that's what this man was saying. It was not wondering, well, how much longer is he going to go? It was, hopefully he'll get the idea. He's gone too long. It's already been too long. Now, again, nobody get any ideas about that, but I thought that was pretty funny. Now, this is one of the most frequent questions for God in the Psalms. How long? And that's usually combined with other questions as well. This one, how long will you let this go on? But there's others that are tagged on at the end of the how long that we see through the Psalms. But here, the psalmists assume that God is nearby, He's aware, and He is capable, but He's just not intervening, and they don't understand why. A few examples of these. Psalm 13, verses 1 and 2 is a great example of this. The psalmist says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Verses 1 and 2 of Psalm 13. Psalm 35:17 says, how long, O Lord, will you look on? Psalm 6:3, my soul also is struck with terror while you, O Lord, how long? How long? And then Psalm 90:13, turn, O Lord, how long? Have compassion on your servants. How long is this going to keep going on? It's been too long. God, I need you. Most often, how long is an unconditional objection. Sometimes it may be an inquiry of time. But normally it's an unconditional objection. So, when you think about this, the psalmists are kind of in a way, when they say how long, like that man looking at that clock, they're kind of in a way, they're asking God how long, they're saying how long about this pain. They're not asking whether they must endure another 5 minutes or 5 years. They're standing in the assembly asserting that it's already been too long. This pain has been too long, especially when there's a God who can end their suffering, but He hasn't, and He doesn't. So how long? That's question 2. Question 3, I know we're almost out of time, so we might have to pick up the other 4 next week. But number 3, why do you act more human than divine is a question. That might sound weird, but why do you act more human than divine? This question never occurs in the Psalms as it is worded. However, many psalmists questions that propose this particular excuse for why God so near in relationship fails to respond to our trouble. For example, Psalm 44:23 says, rouse yourself. Why do you sleep, O Lord? Awake, do not cast us off forever. God, as a spirit, doesn't need to sleep. So there's again, is giving him this human attribute, this human thing. Why are you acting like a human? Is kind of the question. Psalm 35:23, wake up, bestir yourself for my defense, for my cause, my God and my Lord. Again, wake up. Why are you sleeping? Psalm 59, 4 and 5, rouse yourself, come to my help and see. You, Lord God of hosts, are God of Israel, awake to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. Their questions are not as innocent or naive as they might first appear. What kind of God falls asleep when our lives are on the line? And that's kind of the troubling part of this question. Why would they ask that of God? And that's kind of the point. They're trying to persuade God to act as they've known God to act throughout their history and what God has done as He's delivered His people from enemies and bondage and different things. Now, there's also not just the sleeping part, but there's also questions of forgetfulness that are combined with this idea. Acting more human. Humans, we are forgetful. We realize, though, God does not forget unless He chooses to forget, right? God can choose to forget, and that's what He does with our sins when they are forgiven. He chooses to forget them, to forgive and forget. But the forgetfulness of God is not something that just happens to Him, in other words. And so there's some Psalms that question that way about God's forgetfulness. And that idea that when God does it, it's deliberate, it's not a lapse of memory, we find that in Lamentations 5, about verse 20, that idea. But anyways, some Psalms that kind of give this idea. In Psalm 44:24 says, will you forget our affliction and oppression? Have you forgotten what we're going through? Psalm 77:9, has God forgotten to be gracious? Psalm 13 verse 1 and 42 verse 9 both say, will you forget me forever? That sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Will you forget me forever? Do you remember, I can't remember the name of the video, but it's the little girl that goes to the dentist. Do you remember that? And she's still kind of loopy from the drugs that she took before the dentist. And she's saying these funny things. Or no, it's not the girl. I think is it the boy? He's like, will it be like this forever? Do you remember that video? I think it's the little boy that says that. But the idea, he feels so out of it and just crazy, and he's like, is it going to be like this forever? And it sounds dramatic. Why? When it says, how long are you going to hide your face from me? Are you going to hide yourself forever? But in intense loneliness and darkness and struggle, these psalmists are expressing to God that they feel that He's not there and He doesn't care. And is this how it's always going to be? I can't handle that. I need your presence, and I need to remember that presence. Will you forget me forever? The psalmists know that the divine nature does not forget. So to ask God, why have you forgotten, is to assert that God chose to forget. That's the intensity behind the question. Have y'all heard of bell? Okay, all right. It's 7:14. So we'll do one more, and if the bell rings, it rings. I was waiting for someone to stand up and look at... Miss Jill, did you turn and look at the clock? You might not have stood up, but I saw you turn and look. All right, well, that means the other bell's coming in just a few seconds. So we'll stop there. We'll pick up at number 4, Lord willing, next week, and we'll look at the last 4, 5, 6, and 7. Of these questions, and then with whatever time we have left, we'll move into the next thought. Like I said, we've only got a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so left of this class, maybe 4, and then we'll dive into a new study. But I like this because I feel like it's something that we don't really talk about. And if you come across some of these in the Scriptures, some of these Psalms, the natural course of action, I think, is when it sounds confusing or questionable in a sense to what we understand, we might just push it to the side and keep going to the familiar Psalms. So I hope through this class maybe you've gotten just a little bit of encouragement and challenge from these lament Psalms, and it's caused you to maybe look at them differently. Not in a bad differently, but in a way maybe that you realize the punch they pack, the power that's behind them, and the motivation that is given to us to grow in our relationship with God, where we're not just having a superficial conversation, but we're close enough with God where we're really willing to express how we feel right now. To let God know that, and to know that He loves us and He hears us in those moments. Thank you all for being here, and I guess we'll see you again in just a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. There we are. Good to see you tonight. Thank you for coming and being with us here at the Central Church of Christ. Hope your classes went well. Now our invitation song is going to be number 911, 911. And so if you want to turn in your books to that, you can. It'll also be on the PowerPoint. We're doing verses 1, 2, and 4 of number 911 here in just a minute. I know that this is going to be a part of the announcements as well, but I'll go ahead and make this announcement too, so it's repeated twice. But Mr. Tommy says he is in need of strong back, weak-minded people to get downstairs and help move some tables. So we have our evangelism seminar coming up Sunday. We need help moving some tables around downstairs. So if you will, as soon as services are over, just go straight downstairs if you're able to do that. That way we can get it done quick. And then we'll have those tables ready to go for the seminar this Sunday. So that'll come back to you again in another announcement. And then you've heard it twice. There's no reason you shouldn't be down there. So hope that you'll come and help with that. Hopefully tonight you heard something in class that was motivating or encouraging or challenging for you in your faith and your walk with God. And we always, we say each week, this is our opportunity that if there's something in our life that we need to make right with God, we have that opportunity now. It's a great moment to be able to reflect and make sure we're where we need to be spiritually speaking, and that there's nothing that is hindering our relationship with God. Now, with as chaotic and crazy and difficult as life on this earth can be, there are a lot of obstacles that are thrown in our way, in our path, that distract and that discourage. And so, in moments like now, in moments like these, we want to give people that opportunity to acknowledge that, to let God take those distractions and those discouragements away, and to give us an opportunity to refocus and make sure we're living that good Christian life we're called to live. And so tonight, if you're here and you're not a Christian, the first thing you need to do is to make the best decision that you'll ever make in your life, the decision to become a child of God, to become a Christian. And that involves repenting of the sin that's in your life, turning away from it and turning to God. It involves making that great confession that Jesus is the Son of God, just like the eunuch did in Acts chapter 8. And it involves being baptized for remission of your sins, like so many all through the book of Acts did for their salvation, for the remission of their sins. And so tonight, if you're not a Christian, if you need to be baptized for remission of your sins, you can come forward and we'll help take care of that so that you can start living the greatest life known to man, the greatest life anyone could ever live, the life of a child of God, the life of a Christian. Tonight, if you're here and you've made that decision, but there's been things that have caused you to lose focus, that have caused you to get discouraged, to lose motivation, to maybe go back into the kind of life you lived before Jesus, and you realize you need to refocus your life tonight. If that's the case, you can come forward and we'll pray together. But if you have any need whatsoever, we pray that you come as we stand and as we sing.
Bring Christ your broken life, so marred by sin.